Good afternoon, guys. Thanks, Lola, for joining me. One of the reasons I actually wanted to do this is a little unusual for me because I normally cover wage and hour issues or employment law issues. But I got an email from you a couple of weeks ago, which caught my interest. And I know me and you had spoken about this briefly when we were voting on the propositions, and you had expressed some concern about this Prop 19. So I wanted to just a disclaimer. I am also obviously a client of yours, and we're both lawyer buddies. We've known each other for a long time. Why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself, Lalit?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Sanjay. So my name is Lalit Kundani. I'm a trust and estates lawyer. I've been practicing for many years now here in California. And what we're going to talk about today is Prop 19, which a lot of you saw on the ballot this past November. It did pass by a small margin. And I think it's really important, Sanjay, for people to really understand what this does, what effect this has for most people. And I think there's a lot of confusion about this prop. So I'm happy that you chose to talk about this today.
Yeah, I'm going to apologize in advance because I am one of your clients, and I'm going to ask you non-lawyer questions because I'm going to be curious. So apologizing in advance. I may interrupt you. So, but I definitely want to make sure I got a chance to watch your presentation before, and I think it's phenomenal. But I still want to ask you some questions. So be ready for me interrupting you.
Sounds good.
All right, let's get started.
Sure. So the very first thing I'll say is, none of this is legal advice. What I'm talking about in general is general things that everyone should know about the prop, but everybody's situation is very different. And it's really important that everyone speaks to an attorney or an advisor on their particular situation, because we've seen it where for one family, the solution is going to look very different from the other family. The other thing is that because this prop just passed, there's a lot of things that we still don't know, which I'll talk about some of those things in a few minutes. But because there's still so much data out there that hasn't yet been settled, it would be very difficult for anyone to give just a custom a broad solution across the board. So I just want to make sure everyone takes this with a grain of salt. The big things, the big take-home item, Sanjay, is that the Prop 19 has two parts to it. There are certain good things of Prop 19 and there's certain bad things of Prop 19. So I try to make it simple. This is what I call the 30,000-foot overview. The big winners are the people who are looking to sell their home and buy a new home. If you're over 55, if you're what they call severely disabled, or if you are a victim of like a natural disaster, like a wildfire, then there are certain positive things that come out of Prop 19, which basically means that you're going to save money. Meaning when you sell your house and you go to a new house, you may be able to keep your old property tax value. So that's really important for those categories of people. That takes effect April 1st. So April 1st, if you're looking to sell and move, you'd be better off waiting till April 1st because you can keep that low property tax value. We'll go through an example, but that's the big winners in Prop 19. The losers are if you are a parent or you are a child, and if you're looking to transfer property between each other, whether the parents are alive or whether this happens after the parents die, any transfers between a parent and a child is going to cause a reassessment of the property tax. And that means the property tax is going to go up. And so they're going to pay a lot more money because of Prop 19. And this takes place February 16th. So there's two start dates. For the winners, that doesn't happen until April 1st. For the losers, that takes place February 16th. Now, the big thing to understand is that there's still time between now and February where you can make certain changes, perhaps, to how you own your properties so that you don't have to lose as much as you would if you don't make those changes.
Right.
This is kind of a recap, but basically the way we're kind of identifying this is that this is a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? So everybody kind of thought, oh, Prop 19 is so good because it's going to, the way it was called is it was a bill to protect the seniors is how it was drafted when it was on the ballot. So a lot of people voted yes for this. A lot of my clients voted yes for this. And now they come back and they go, but I didn't know that it had all of these, traps in it. And that's usually what happens with these props. So there's good parts about it. That's the sheep. But then there's some really bad parts about it. That's the wolf. And so it's really important to understand that this could affect people in different ways.
My first interruption. So what do you think, what was the reason that the Prop 19 was really being pushed? I mean, who was really benefiting from this?
So that's not there's no secret. I think everyone, the realtor community admits to this. So if you always follow the money, it was almost like $40 million that was put into this bill by the California Realtors Association. And the reason is because this whole prop, both the good and the bad, the one thing that they have in common is this is supposed to increase the amount of sales of real estate. So if you're a senior and you're over 55, you're incentivized to sell your home, go into a new home, because you can keep your property tax value low. So for those people, there's an incentive to sell. For the losers, if you're a child and your parent passes away and you inherit the property and the property tax jumps up now to a lot more than it would have been before this, now you're incentivized to sell because you're going to think, well, gee, I don't want to sit in a property that is now 10 times more the property tax that my parents were paying. I can't afford to keep this. I'd rather sell. So this was a bill pushed by the Realtors Association. They tried to do this a few years back. That prop didn't pass. They got a little bit smarter in how they wrote this one, and they marketed it a lot better, and it passed. It barely passed, 51 to 49, but it did pass. And so now we have to work with this prop.
Got it. Thank you.
So it's really important to understand what the current law is before we jump into Prop 19. So this is just kind of a brief timeline of the three different props that make up current law. So you have Prop 13, which passed in 1978. You have Prop 58, which passed 8 years later. And then 10 years after that, you had Prop 193. I'm going to make it very simple, but it's important that people understand this. The current law works like this when it comes to property taxes. If I buy a house, let's say I buy a house at $100,000, that house, the property tax for that house is going to be based on the amount I paid for that house. Every year, that house's property tax is going to go up by the assessed value. So if I bought the house for $100,000 in year one, in year two, the assessed value is going to be $102,000. It goes up about 2%. Okay, it can't go up more than that, but it can go up to 2%. And then so you pay the property tax on the assessed value. So even though the home might go up a lot, the assessed value will go up a little bit. That's current law. That's why your property tax bill isn't super high, is because it's always based on the assessed value, not what the home is actually worth. So if you're looking at it graphically, the blue line shows you what the true value of the home is, but the orange line shows you what you're paying property tax on. It's the lower assessed value. So this is what the current law says. And it says that, but if there's a change of ownership under current law, if you buy it, if you sell your home to someone else, if you are a new buyer, if you transfer your property to somebody else, that's called a change of ownership. So anytime there's a change of ownership on the property, somebody else gets added to title, then the property gets reassessed at fair market value. Then they won't look at the assessed value. They'll actually look at what is the property really worth. That's going to be, the tax will now go on that value. Now, the current law says that if you're transferring between parents and children, it is a change of ownership, but there's an exception. And the exception says that we're not going to reassess it at fair market value. We're going to keep it at assessed value as long as it's being transferred between parents and children. So if it's your primary home that's being transferred, they say primary home you can transfer to your children, no questions asked. Children can transfer their primary home to their parents, no questions asked. They won't get reassessed under current law. They have no problem with that.
Right, you're basically saying, I'm sorry, again, like some of this sounds like very commonsensical. Obviously, this makes sense to me why there's an exception, because obviously parents want to pass on their legacy to their children. Okay.
Right, absolutely. So the current law says that if it's your primary residence, you could give it to your kid, and it's not going to get reassessed. The kid is still going to keep your same low property tax value. Now, remember, Prop 19 changes this. Okay, Prop 19 will change this. I'm just talking to you about what the current law is. So if it's a primary residence, current law says no problem. If it's a non-primary residence, so sometimes people have rental homes, sometimes people have commercial properties, sometimes people have vacation homes or a second home. So any kind of second property that you own, under current law, they allow you to transfer that to your parent or your child up to $2 million of assessed value if you're married. If you're not married, it's $1 million. So if I'm a single person and I want to give my second home to my child, I could do that up to $1 million of assessed value. Okay. So that's current law. Now, these rules do not apply to LLCs. So if somebody says, well, I own my property through an LLC, there's this whole different rules for LLCs that we'll talk about later. But what I'm talking about is if you own it or if your trust owns it, a lot of people have living trusts. So if it's you or your living trust, these rules in red apply under current law. If it's owned in an LLC, that's a different set of rules that we'll talk about. So this is what was the law, what still is the law until February 16th. So we could use these rules before February 16th because these rules are not bad. These are good rules. I could transfer my primary home to my child before February. My child keeps my low property tax. But if I transfer my property to my child after February, it's going to get reassessed, right? So this is why it's important to know the current law, because you could use the current law before February.
This makes this now, which is why you were so urgently sending out those emails, and I know, which is why I wanted to have you on, because to me that sounds, I can see why you were concerned. So
yeah, and it's really important for people to understand, like, this is a very narrow window. This is a place where you really could get quote unquote grandfathered in if you take advantage of that window. Now, I got to say this, not everyone's going to qualify. As much as I would love to see everyone qualify for this, for some people, it's just not going to make sense. And Sanjay, you know, we both have talked about this with our practices. We believe in just honest advice to clients. You know, there are some firms out there that will just take advantage of this. I have turned down more business these past few weeks, telling people, look, it doesn't make sense in your case. But if it does make sense, then you should do this. It's important to take advantage. So Sanjay, I thought I'd put an example here for the group, because sometimes I learn better through examples too.
And I love these examples, so thank you for sharing these, by the way.
Yeah, so let's say my business partner, as you know, Sanjay's name's Simon, so we're picking on Simon here. So Simon is 60 years old and he owns a home worth, let's say, 450,000. That's the value of the home today, the fair market value. He is not paying property tax on the fair market value. He bought it a long time ago. So he is paying property tax that's on the assessed value. Here, the assessed value could be much lower. Maybe it's $180,000 assessed value, so that his property tax is only $2,100. Okay, so that is the current law. Now, if Simon wants to sell his home and get into a new home, but the new home is worth $500,000, this is the good part about Prop 19. So what would normally happen is, without Prop 19, he would have to sell his old home, buy a new home. When he buys his new home, he has to pay property tax on the fair market value, which is $500,000. That would mean that under current law, his property tax would be $6,000. But the good part about Prop 19 is that it says you get to keep your old property tax value if you're 55 or over. You get to keep your $2,100 property tax, and you just pay on the difference. So you're gonna get reassessed on $50,000 here, and that's going to make your property tax go up by $600, meaning instead of $2,100, it's $2,700. This is still good, because if it wasn't for Prop 19, if you're 55 or over, you'd have to pay $6,000 in property taxes in this example. So this is what we call the good. The good part about Prop 19 is that if you're 55 or over, you're severely disabled, I would recommend, usually, if you're going to sell, keep it in your name, wait till April, sell your home after April so you could take advantage of this good part about Prop 19. The new home, by the way, could be worth more. As you know now, the new home could be worth more than the old home. You just pay on the difference. You could also move anywhere in California, and this applies. I know that sounds obvious, but under the current law, there were some props where you could do it in certain counties. Now, under Prop 19, you could, if you're 55 or over, you could sell and buy a more expensive home anywhere in the state and just pay on the difference. And again, it's limited to a certain group of people. The other thing that's not on this slide that I want to mention is you could do this up to 3 times in your life. You could buy and sell and buy a new home up to 3 times using Prop 19 if you're in one of these categories. So this is also an advantage starting April 1st.
Okay, wow, okay.
Okay, so that's the good.
Uh-oh.
Now let's talk about the bad, right? The bad, here's an example. Let's say we have Lucy. I picked Lucy, like Lucy Obal. So we have, I love Lucy. She owns a home worth 1.5 million. Her property tax, again, because it's on assessed value of 210,000, is only $2,500. She bought it a long time ago. It's only been going up 2% a year. So she's good. She's got a very low property tax basis. Now, Lucy dies and she leaves her home to little Ricky. Now, little Ricky should, under current law, because it's her primary home, under current law, he would just take that and his tax would only go up 2% under current law. So he should only pay $2,550 in this example, right? Mom dies, leaving the primary residence to him. His property tax should only go up about 2%. But under Prop 19, they look at whether or not Ricky is moving into the home or if he's not moving into the home. So if it's a primary residence, under Prop 19, how high the property tax goes up depends on if the child is going to live in the property. If Ricky says, I'm not going to move into the property, I live in Texas, or I got my own home, I can't move into my mother's home. If he doesn't move into the property, the entire property gets reassessed at fair market value. So he is now going to pay tax on the 1.5, meaning his tax is going to be $18,000.
Wow.
Okay. And that's just year one. It's going to go up every year. Now, if Lucy transfers her property after February to Ricky, like while she's alive, sometimes this happens where the parents don't know. They go, I'll just give the property to the kid. Well, you shouldn't do that after February, because if you transfer after February between parent and child, it's going to trigger a reassessment. So I say this because a lot of people go, oh, Prop 19, that doesn't happen until I die. Well, no. As you already know, good part about Prop 19 is if you're alive, you can move and sell while you're alive, and there's good things there. But the bad part can also happen while you're alive. If a parent is living in the property, but they gifted it to their child or they added their child to the deed, that's going to cause a reassessment while the parent's living there. So this could happen while the parent's alive, or if the parent's dead, just that as soon as the transfer happens, then it's going to get triggered. Okay. Now, what happens if Ricky decides to move in? If Ricky says, I'm going to move into my mom's home, I already live in my mom's home, this is going to be my home. Now what happens? Well, you'll see that they give you a little bit of a break. It's still going to go up. It's going to, in this example, it's going to go up to $6,000 instead of $2,550. How do they do that? They take the assessed value of the parent, they add $1 million to that. So in this example, Lucy's assessed value was $210,000. That's what she was paying property tax on. They add $1 million to that $210,000. You get 1.21. And that 1.21, you get to keep the same property tax. But the difference between 1.5, what the home is worth, and 1.21, now you're going to add that in. And so that's how you get to the $6,000 here.
Wow, what a big jump.
Yeah, so it's still a big jump. It's still a bad thing.
Right.
But if you're moving in, you might catch a break. All right. So that's the only good thing when it comes to the parent-child change. That's the only good thing they left in there for you. The problem, Sanjay, is what if there's more than one child?
You just beat me to it. That's the question I was going to ask you. So what happens then?
See, and we really don't know. It's so new that we have theories of what could happen. My theory is that if there's 3 kids and one child moves in, my theory is that 1/3 of the property will not get reassessed, but 2/3 of the property will get reassessed. Now, we really don't know what they're going to end up saying. And I'll go through some other questions that we don't know, but this is the only light in the tunnel that exists right now, is that if a child moves in, you're going to catch a little bit of a break, but it's how much of a break really depends on your situation.
Fair enough. Okay.
All right. Here's some other questions we've gotten from people, and this happens. What if the parent, they live alone, they have to move out, they go into a nursing home, or they rent out their home, and then they die, and then the child moves into the home. Well, if I'm moving into the home, don't I catch the break? No. You only catch the break if when your parent dies, it was their primary residence, they were living there, and the child makes it their primary residence. So both the parent at death and the child have to make it their primary home. If mom didn't live there and the kid moves in, you don't catch the break.
So that's the big bad word, right?
Yeah. And so here's another question. Like, what if the child decides to move into the other home? Let's say Lucy has a vacation home. Now, Lucy dies and the child goes, I don't want mom's primary home, but I will move into the vacation home. You can't do that. It's going to still be reassessed. So that primary exception the primary residence exception only works when the parent dies with that being their primary residence and the kid makes it their primary residence. Okay, so these are the bad things we just talked about. If it's a rental property, it's going to get reassessed. If it's a commercial property, reassessed. Vacation home, reassessed. If it's a primary home, it's going to get reassessed unless the child moves in within 1 year. That's the limit they put in now. And even there, it could get reassessed, as we showed you in the example. So pretty much a parent-child transfer after February, it's going to get reassessed, okay? And this takes place February 16th of next year. So very, very quickly coming up.
I'm going to probably touch upon this a little bit. This is, and like you said in the beginning, that people are surprised to know about this. That was it just there's no discussion on this, or just that people just didn't understand, or
it's a frustrating part for us lawyers, because we tend to hear a lot of the inside scoop about what this really is about. But the unfortunate part is the general public doesn't read all the things that we see and go through. They don't read the bills. I mean, these bills are hundreds of pages. We do that, but the general public doesn't. They read an LA Times article, which oddly enough opposed Prop 19. There's a lot of newspapers that were saying to people, watch out for this prop. But because of how it was marketed, because of how it was titled, because it was said protection for seniors, they were only talking about the good. They intentionally didn't market the bad, which makes sense. And so that's why it passed. I have a strong feeling that a lot of people who voted yes for it didn't quite understand the true nature of the prop.